Hello, welcome once again to the DraftKings Daily Trot. I'm Big Italy 42. He is Scott Malick at Sports 25 to Life. And we're talking about the action on DraftKings tonight. And happy Chris Sale Day to you. He's $12,800 today. But, I mean, he's just so far and above the top option right now. I don't even think it's particularly close. He's at a 34.2% strikeout rate on the season now. Going against the St. Louis team that has the fourth highest strikeout rate against lefties on the season. We were talking a little before the show. I mean, obviously this season's got even worse, missing guys like Matt Holliday. But, I mean, this is just not a great offense right now. And Sale is probably the most dominant pitcher outside of maybe Max Scherzer. But, I mean, Sale's getting 10 strikeouts every single game.
Yeah, and I'm just seeing now as we started this that Sonny Gray just got scratched for tonight. So he's, like, by far the best option.
Wow. Who did he get replaced with? Did you see yet?
I haven't said yet. I just see Max Wildstein on Twitter right here. Wow. Athletics have scratched Sonny Gray from his start tonight per Tracy Ringlesby.
Wow. Looks like they're going to throw Kendall Graven out there again then, right?
Yeah, back-to-back days. That'd be hilarious. Yeah, I don't know what they're going to do. That's going to make an interesting value pitcher, I would imagine, because, I mean, the Rockies – I mean, we'll just move on to that now. The Rockies aren't good on the road. I think they're at like a 298 WOBA on the road. It's obviously a solid pitcher's park. I mean, I was pretty excited about playing some Sonny Gray and GPPs and even some cash games and stuff. Maybe going with some Sale Gray lineups, but we're not going to be able to do that now. Like you said, I think even more so now, Sale's the top pitcher on this slate. I mean, I don't even think it's close now. I think he's going to be really heavily owned, even with the fact that he's not a big favorite on this one. I'm trying to think who this leaves as my second favorite pitcher on the slate now. Maybe Dallas Keuchel. I like him a decent amount against Kansas City with Hosmer out of the lineup. He's a small, well, I wouldn't say small favorite. He's a decent favorite, especially given what the favorites are like on today's slate. Outside of Sonny Gray, there was basically no one above 150 besides Keuchel and Marco Estrada. So those are going to be the two guys I'm looking at probably now after Sale, but I don't think either one of them really approaches what you can get from Sale. It's not really even remotely close at this point to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's a 6-run total there for Sale, like you said. So, I mean, it's crazy because we saw his floor last time. I mean, Sale he just didn't have it. He's got 10 Ks, but gave up 5 earned runs in 6 2/3, and he still scored 19 DraftKings points. So, I mean, that's about as bad as it gets for Chris Sale. So just keep that in mind. I mean, that's the ultimate security for your cash games. So a couple other options. You mentioned Keuchel. I like him as well. If we're going to go cheap, I like Ryan Vogelsong. I mean, it's hard not to pick on this Miami lineup without Giancarlo Stanton. And obviously, Vogelsong been pitching better recently than he actually is. I mean, hasn't given up an earned run either his last 2 starts. You certainly don't expect that. But, I mean, if there's any team that he can continue to shut out, you go Seattle, San Diego, now you get Miami. You get pretty much the 3 most beatable offenses in all of the game, back to back. So $6,100. I think he's a perfectly fine option to pair with Sale in your cash games if you're not paying up for one of the other guys.
Yeah, I like him. I mentioned Estrada. He's the other guy I'm going to look at in that same area. 6,300 on DraftKings. Vogelsong 6,100. We were talking about before the show. Boston just really doesn't have a very intimidating lineup right now. Estrada's been fantastic in 4 of his last 5 games. Went 8 2/3 with 10 strikeouts last time out. He's been really impressive at home despite it being a hitter's park there. So he's another guy I'm going to look at in that range to pair with Sale. I mean, paying 12.8 for Sale, you almost have to go cheap with your second pitcher. It gets really dicey in your batting order if you start trying to go like Sale, Keuchel, or even somebody like Sale Verlander, if you were trying to go like somewhere more in that mid-range. I mean, Verlander's 7,500 today. He's not a favorite against Pittsburgh. And, I mean, I'd rather just go down to one of these guys in the low 6s. It just makes a lot more sense to me.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And then an interesting guy coming off probably one of the best starts he'll ever have, Mike Montgomery, $6,800. And, I mean, you certainly aren't chasing that. Well, maybe you are. I'm not chasing that complete game 10K performance against Kansas City, but what I am doing is picking on San Diego at Petco because that's the offense has been awful. Second highest strikeout rate over the past month. I mean, this is not a high strikeout guy. You're not expecting 10 Ks from him, but if he gives you a quality start, this is a team that's swinging at everything. So, I mean, you obviously wouldn't be surprised to get 6, 7 innings, maybe 5, 6 Ks, and $6,800 is a really cheap price tag for a guy in that spot.
Yep. It looks like Chris Bassett is starting for the A's tonight.
Oh, my.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's going to be interesting. I don't even know if he's going to be in the player pools, is he?
That's what I'm trying to see here.
Yeah, that's what I'm checking out too.
No, I don't see it. I don't think he's in there.
Yeah, so I guess we can ignore that now then. Let's see. I think probably the other guy that I would target now is another cheap guy. Maybe, is it Jungman or Youngman? Taylor Jungman?
I think it's Jungman.
All right, we'll go with Jungman. I mean, at some point, Philly's going to stop putting up runs, and they're going to have those really rough games like they usually do. For 6,200 on DraftKings, I think you can do a lot worse than Jungman in GPPs. I actually like him a little more on FanDuel today, where he's in the low fives. But I think he's another option down there. I prefer both Estrada and Vogelsong to him, but he's just another guy I'll probably mix a little bit in GPPs. One other guy that's kind of interesting that I don't think really anyone alone is Andrew Haney for the Angels. We saw what C.J. Wilson did to the Yankees last night. And after I hyped C.J. Wilson all day yesterday, I did not play him nearly enough. I think Haney's going to do a similar thing to the Yankees today. He's not quite as good as C.J. Wilson, obviously, but he looked pretty good in his first startup from the minors this year. The guy's still only, I believe, 23 years old, has pretty good stuff. He's a really high draft pick. At 6,900, I think he's an interesting GPP play as a small favorite in this game, with the Angels looking like they're the ones that are going to be scoring most of the runs in this one.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. And then I'll throw out one more tournament option. Danny Salazar hasn't pitched particularly well recently, but is pitching in Tampa Bay, a place where you like to have your pitchers. And we know he has massive upside. He still has a 30% strikeout rate on the season. And it's not a Tampa Bay team that strikes out a ton, but that's going to keep his ownership low because we've seen Salazar have his way with a lot of these teams at some point.
Yeah, and Tampa Bay just hasn't been hitting at all. I mean, we saw, what was that guy's name last night? I'm blanking on it right now. Yeah, Cody Anderson just looked absolutely fantastic against them.
Perfect through what, 6 1/3, 7 1/3?
Yeah, something like that. I mean, there's just nobody in Tampa Bay's lineup that is hitting right now. I mean, Evan Longoria is obviously their best hitter, but he's ice cold right now, and everybody else in the lineup has basically struggled all season long.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's just a nice matchup right there. I mean, Salazar's been probably, outside of maybe Jimmy Nelson, the most inconsistent pitcher that's actually been good at times throughout this season because, I mean, his starts just are like really hot one day, he gets 7, 8, 9 strikeouts and goes 7 innings into the game and then just gets absolutely roughed up in the next start. So he's definitely a solid GPP play against a Tampa Bay team that's been struggling as much as they have.
Yeah, and I mean, his problem really is the long ball, like you said, and throwing too many pitches. I mean, he's given up at least 1 home run in 8 of his last 10 starts. If he keeps his pitch count down, which I think he can, it's not a particularly patient Tampa Bay team. We've seen it before, but also, you know, he's a guy that generally, like you said, with that high strikeout upside, he's a guy that doesn't have to pitch deep to pay off his salary. I mean, he can give you 6 innings to get 10, 11 Ks, so I definitely like that as well. All right, let's move on here to catcher, where there's some interesting options. Russell Martin's the guy I really like against Eduardo Rodriguez, $4,400. Rodriguez came in, was the DFS darling for about a week, and then he was terrible in 2 of his 3 starts. So, of course, the Blue Jays mash left-handed pitching. They haven't been very good over the past week, so I'm interested to see where their ownership will be tonight. But I think Russell Martin, if you're paying up, it's going to be him or Buster Posey. But I'm conflicted because I don't really know who's going to be higher owned. Maybe they'll both be right around the same because it's once you drop down past them, you're probably looking at Yasmani Grandal at $3,900 as a lefty against De La Rosa.
Yeah. I mean, Grandal's interesting today just because, I mean, I like him basically anytime he's facing a righty. That's the big thing for me. DraftKings is a little expensive at $3,900. I did hear that they're going to close the roof of that stadium for the rest of the series probably, which makes sense because it's been about 110 degrees there for 3 days now. But it also, I mean, the heat is one of the main reasons I played so many Dodgers yesterday. And if they're going to have it sitting at 80, 85 in there today, I mean, that takes away a little bit of that edge. Obviously, Grandal hit a home run last night too. So I think he's a fine play. I think Posey's a good one. Matt Wieters is another guy that I like quite a bit tonight. Facing Colby Lewis for Texas. Assuming he's in the lineup, I know he's a little bit banged up right now. I think he sat out yesterday, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. Caleb Joseph started.
Yeah, so if he's in the lineup, I like him quite a bit. The wind's blowing out there tonight. Only $3,900. I really like playing guys that hit from the left side of the plate against Colby Lewis because he struggles against lefties. Weeder's a switch hitter, obviously, so he's a guy I'm going to be looking at if he's in the lineup tonight. But we'll have to see what that injury's like. They didn't really disclose much of anything yesterday, as far as I know. I think they just listed him as day-to-day and didn't say anything.
Yeah, I didn't see details either, so kind of assume he'll be back in the lineup tonight, but I imagine if there's any sort of real legitimate concern, then they'll let him rest. But I do think we would have heard something about that if he wasn't going to play again. An interesting cheap option, if you're not playing Cole Hamels, Jonathan Lucroy, as we know, masters left-handed pitching, had a great game last night. He's $3,100, put up 20 DraftKings points last night with 4 hits, so really like him. If I'm paying down, I think that Lucroy is the guy I'm going to, because, you look at the guys around him, he's by far the best hitter on that range. First base options now, and there's a lot of them like there always are. You get Paul Goldschmidt, gets Carlos Frias, who he's been... he hasn't been awful, but he's gotten hit. He's gotten rocked plenty of times. You mentioned the heat there, so I think the Goldschmidt's a really interesting tournament option. Obviously, Edwin Encarnacion is going to be a popular play at home. Some other guys that I'm really looking at, though, Albert Pujols against Ivan Nova. He just continues to be really cheap. Considering his upside, I should say. But 4,400, hasn't had a homer now in 6 games, but we've seen what he's been doing, and Von Nova, he did shut out the Phillies over 6 2/3 last time, but he struck out 1 guy. So, people are putting the ball in play against him. And Pujols, maybe everyone's off him because his hot streak seemingly has come to an end, but I think he's a really good tournament option tonight.
Yeah, I think he's a fine play, too. 4,400 is a nice price there, especially when you're looking at, some of these other higher-priced options that don't have great matchups either. I think Joey Votto is probably my favorite cash game play in terms of first base plays, facing a righty in Hughes. Only 4,200, had a nice game yesterday. But you look at some of these other guys at the top. Anthony Rizzo facing a lefty. I don't have a problem with him against lefties, but I don't really want to pay 4,700 for it, despite the fact that it's John Neese. Paul Goldschmidt and Adrian Gonzalez. We talked about the roof being closed tonight already. I prefer Adrian Gonzalez, I think, slightly, just because of the price difference. I don't know if I want to pay 5,600 for Goldschmidt today. It's a little pricey. He had a nice game yesterday. Obviously, he's always the top upside play on the board for GPPs, but he seems a little pricey to me for the most part. But maybe that'll keep his ownership percentage down a little bit. There's just not a lot I love at first base today. Yeah. I'm probably going to have a ton of Posey and Pujols, honestly.
Yeah, I've got one cheap guy for you that I think is just way underpriced. Lucas Duda, $3,400 against Kyle Hendricks, who's gotten hit hard his last couple starts. And Duda, hasn't been a phenomenal hitter this year, but hitting almost 300 at home as opposed to, I believe it's 216 on the road. He just hits much better at Citi Field. So I think that he's a really fine cash game option at $3,400 where there's really just not much down there cheap that you feel okay about. Second base now. Really nobody I'm touching below Duda at first base. Second base options. Altuve gets a lefty, and Altuve's really started to come back on recently. Not that we were ever worried about it, but he's got a home run in 2 of his last 3 games. He's been aggressive on the base pass. He's got 4 steals. He's attempted 5 in his last 5 games as well, so he's going to be one of your top options, of course. Brian Dozier went deep last night in Cincinnati. We know he's got power, and now he gets Anthony DeSclafani, who's been pretty good, but not a guy you're shying away from. And then Ben Zobrist's probably going to be one of my favorite plays at second base here against Jorge De La Rosa.
Yeah, I like all of those quite a bit. Second base is pretty interesting tonight. You've got those top options. You've got some pretty decent value options also. One guy that I'm going to be looking at quite a bit is, you mentioned targeting Nova for the Yankees. I like Johnny Giavotella at 2,800 against him if he's sitting at the top of the order. There's a couple other cheap guys that are hitting a little bit lower in the lineup. Another one that's been hitting higher in the lineup, Danny Espinosa's been hitting second quite a bit lately. He's got second base, third base eligibility for only 2,900. He's another guy I'll look at. Joe Panic against Matt Latos at 3,500. I think it's an okay play, although he lacks a little bit of the upside that I prefer if I'm going to pay that much for a second baseman.
Yeah, that's true. And I still like Brunetto Odor. He's getting a little bit pricey at 3,900, but assuming he's batting first or second in the lineup, you got to like that again in Baltimore. Third base options, Todd Frazier once again. Got to love him in tournaments, 4,900. But the obvious play here, Josh Donaldson's at home against the lefty. At lefty, he's been struggling no less at $4,800. He's got to be your top option at third base. And as you know, like I like to do if I can't afford Josh Donaldson when they're facing lefty. Mr. Danny Valencia, $3,200. Yep. I mean, he's probably my favorite punt play at any position tonight.
Yeah, I think he's easily the best value third base play. It's not really even close for me, assuming he's in the lineup, which I would expect him to be. Yeah. Outside of that, I mean, I'll look at Kelly Johnson again if he's hitting in the middle of the Braves order against Zimmerman. He's only 2,700. I don't mind Justin Turner, but there's nothing really special about that play today, especially at 4,400 on DraftKings. I think Kyle Seager is an okay play, but at San Diego against Kennedy, 3,100 just doesn't feel great to me. But he's definitely an option also. I think I'm going to stick to the Blue Jays guys for the most part if I can, though.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing as well. If I can fit Donaldson in with Sale, I'm going that route. But probably in cash games, I might end up having to go Danny Valencia. But either way, I mean, both those guys, great plays for you, as they always are against lefties. Moving on to shortstop here. Troy Tulowitzki is a little bit cheap now because he's supposed to be facing Sonny Gray. Now he gets Chris Bassett. So that's going to now make for a pretty interesting GPP play at $4,800 there. Xander Bogaerts, the guy that's been hitting well, but he's up to 4,100. I kind of struggle to pay that price tag. I think the guy that I'm going to be looking at the most here is going to be Brandon Crawford, $3,800 against Matt Latos. Latos has been terrible against lefties. Hasn't been really good in general anyway, but Crawford, one of those few shortstops that actually hits for power, hits for a decent average, puts the ball in play, and I mean, Latos isn't hurting anybody here, so I really like Brandon Crawford.
Yeah, I think he's a fine shortstop play, too. I like Tulowitzki a ton now that Gray's been scratched. That's probably the way I'm going to go in GPPs. A couple other guys I don't mind. Starlin Castro against a lefty is okay if he's hitting fourth in the lineup. He hasn't been anything impressive, but for 3,300, I think he's a solid shortstop play. As far as like really cheap value guys go, there's no one that's hitting like super high in the lineup. It really depends on what Philly does with their second base shortstop situation. We'll see who's in the lineup there. One of those guys usually hits second for pretty cheap. Maybe Cesar Hernandez, maybe DeJesus. I mean, they got a lot of directions they can go with second base shortstop there. So we'll have to keep an eye on that lineup if we're looking for a couple cheap options at shortstop, because there's not a lot else to like cheap at shortstop. I think Segura is a decent play, assuming he's leading off against Hamels, which he usually does against lefties. So I think he's a pretty solid option there, especially for GPPs. Jose Reyes is way too expensive for me outside of a Toronto stack.
Yeah, and I'll throw out Wilmer Flores as well, $2,800. He's not in a bad spot either. Outfield now. It's going to be interesting tonight. I still love Brett Gardner. I don't care that it's a lefty-lefty. I mean, he had a couple big hits off of C.J. Wilson last night. He seemed like the only guy that could hit him. I mean, he hits everyone right now. I love him as a cash game and tournament option. Mike Trout's only $4,900 against Ivan Nova, so he's probably going to be a pretty popular play once again, and rightfully so. And then once you look down a little bit cheaper, there's a couple more interesting options. Jay Bruce against fly ball pitcher. Phil Hughes at Great American, $4,300. Had himself a nice game last time out. Started to hit much better recently, and as we know, it doesn't take much for him to get a hold of one in Great American, and Phil Hughes just has a ton of struggles keeping the ball on the ground.
Yeah, one guy I like quite a bit, Michael Brantley, had a really nice game last night, was 3 for 4 with a stolen base. He has another pretty weak righty in Ramirez for Tampa Bay. He's only 4,400 today. There's one other guy Andre Either, 3,600 against De La Rosa. He's not one of those guys that's going to give you massive numbers, but I mean, yesterday he went 3 for 5 with a home run. I think he scored a couple runs. I mean, he's just solid for his price right now. He's basically playing to keep his job when Carl Crawford comes back, so he's been looking pretty good. Ryan Braun's a GPP played for me against the lefty and Hamels also. There was one other one that I had that was a righty-lefty matchup. Oh, Justin Upton is my other GPP play, like at 4,500 against the lefty in Montgomery. Obviously in San Diego, so not like my favorite park to target, but it's been much more of a hitter's park this year. Upton's been pretty solid lately. I think yesterday was the first time in 12 games that he hasn't reached base, so he's been pretty solid lately.
Yeah, and I'll throw out another guy who's been absolutely on fire. In his last 8 games, at least 7 DraftKings points, and all of them and 12 or more in 6 of 8 of them. Curtis Granderson gets Kyle Hendricks. He's been hitting the ball a ton recently, so you got to like him. Of course, Jock Peterson, another lefty against De La Rosa, probably a popular play once again after homering last night. And then if you're looking for cheap guys, I like Chris Parmelee at $2,900. He's a fine option, assuming that he's in the lineup. We know that Orioles been juggling things a lot, so definitely take a look at that and make sure that he's in the lineup before you put him in there. And then as far as other cheap guys, there's really not a ton to like. You mentioned Kelly Johnson. You can get him in the outfield as well, so he's another option. And there was one more guy right around the 3K range that I was looking at, and I lost him. Oh, Eddie Rosario, another lefty against Dace Sclafani. Dace Sclafani worse against lefties than he gets against righties, so I don't mind targeting him. Eddie Rosario's got a decent amount of power as a cheap bat there, 3,100 too.
Yeah, the other two guys I have in that range, Kristen Orfia for the Cubs has been hitting 5th or 6th against lefties when he's in the lineup. He's 2,700. If he's hitting that high, I think you can consider him for sure. My other one was, where is it? Oh, David Murphy is another lefty for Cleveland that has been getting pretty high in the lineup against righties. We mentioned already Ramirez for Tampa Bay is a guy that's worth targeting. Murphy hit 4th in the lineup against a righty last time out. So if he's hitting up there for 2,900, I think he's a solid GPP play at worst.
Yeah, completely agree with you there. And with that, that's going to wrap things up. Find us on Twitter at DF Cafe, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and find us all of our projections, cheat sheets, our great optimizer Colossus at dailyfantasycafe.com.